As you heard, I left in 1975, went to California, and then continued this great circle route and wound up in New York. But I can remember seeing articles in journals coming out of the department and thinking, gee, that was nice, when the snow was coming down. It was in New York City. Steve already mentioned that I'm blessed with having a great number of family members here. As he pointed out, mostly my wife's family, who go back generations in Texas, and particularly in the Hill Country. Sarah Eckhart's here, who I'm sure you all know well, county judge here for us. And her father was the great Bob Eckhart, a congressman from, I guess, Houston area.
We're from the shallow end of the gene pool.
Yeah. So at any rate, I got myself into a great family. And I also want to repeat something that Steve said. In addition to having family here, my cousin, my sister, I've got Hugh Forrest here, who I had the privilege of having lunch with a couple of days ago and was delighted when he said he was going to attend. Hugh was 94 years old. He was on my thesis committee, signed my thesis, so he let me through. I got through it in part thanks to Hugh. The university really did change my life. It changed it in many ways. I didn't decide on a career path until I was a senior, and I was interested in biology and chemistry, but wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with it. But as a senior, in the final semester of my senior year, I took a course in genetics from Burke Judd, who is a professor here at the university, and he was a fascinating guy. And was working with Drosophila and doing tremendous studies of genetics. He was trying to use state-of-the-art genetic approaches to try to understand how genes are packed into chromosomes, and there were many mysteries that were popping out of his studies that were quite intriguing to me. And we heard earlier about the importance of getting kids into a laboratory early on. Well, I was a latecomer, but thanks to Burke, I realized that I could do a summer stint in a real laboratory, and that changed everything. I did a summer of research in Burke's lab and got hooked on the problems that he was studying, and stayed on as a graduate student, and spent another 3.5 years here in Austin, very enjoyable. There's another very important life-changing event that occurred at that time. When I started attending that course, there was this young woman in the class who was very bright, asked all the great questions, but wanted to hear the answers from Burke and not from me when I tried to talk to her. And that was Laurel Eckhart, my wife. Tried to introduce myself, tried to generate some interest several times in the course, and failed every time. Later, when I was a graduate student with Burke, maybe 6 or 7 months later, I was in the office talking with Burke, and fortunately, Laurel's in Plan 2, and her advisor happened to be Burke, and I didn't know that, of course, at the time, but here she is coming in the door, and I'm there, and I get formally introduced, and all of a sudden I've got some status. So thanks to Burke, thanks to UT, I met my wife. We're still together now after all these years. We're both scientists. Burke had a great impact on her, as he did on me. We both discovered science through Burke's great mentorship. And we both went to Stanford together, and then traveled on to New York, both still pushing science as hard as we can. I want to say a little bit about being back here, seeing many friends and colleagues, and wandering around the campus and being delighted that the bones of the campus are really very much the same. It's a very familiar feeling here. It's a very warm feeling to come back to. I walked over into the new molecular biology building. I say new because it wasn't here when I was a student, and it's a spectacular new home for molecular biology. And I noticed walking through the doors that they had Herman Muller's X-ray machine on display on the first floor. And Herman Muller, in the 1920s, came to Texas. He was recruited from Columbia, where he worked on Drosophila with Thomas Hunt Morgan, who won the Nobel Prize for telling us that genes are on chromosomes and many other things about the way chromosomes work using Drosophila. He was the first American to win a Nobel Prize in medicine and physiology or medicine. And Muller, being of an independent sort, came to Texas. He was probably the most brilliant student that Morgan had, and worked for 10 years right here on campus, and proved that radiation will cause mutations. That radiation is not only did this, of course, prove that radiation is an extreme hazard, but it also became a tool for creating genetic variations that could be studied in great detail. And within just a matter of a few years, we knew much more about the way genes are organized and function because of Muller's work done over in the old bio building. And I got to see his old labs just a couple of days ago, which, again, in that old building, haven't changed that much. But seeing that reminded me of the tremendous history in the natural sciences that you have here at the University of Texas. I can remember as a graduate student walking by that same display of Muller's X-ray machine and being inspired that that great work had taken place right here in Austin. And in fact, when Muller came, his influence was tremendous because there were several other members of the department that he joined who he recruited to work on Drosophila genetics. And a former president of the university, Theophilus Painter, Patterson, after whom the building, Patterson Labs, is named, Stone, a student of that group, all began to work together on Drosophila genetics. And what that produced here in Austin was one of two epicenters of genetics in the world. There was one at Columbia with Thomas Hunt Morgan that eventually moved to the California Institute of Technology, and there was Austin. And I was reminded today by Jeff Shin that even the journal, the most important journal of genetics, entitled Genetics, was for a number of years published right here at the University of Texas at Austin. So this is a cradle of genetic research that has a truly outstanding history. The other point that I'll just make is Muller was here for 10 years, left, went to several other institutions, and it was only in the 1940s when he was recognized by the Nobel Prize. But he was recognized for work that was done here. Now, in my case, I've been in New York for 40 years, but as you heard, the project that I worked on here as a graduate student was the flower, was the bud. It was the exposure to the question, to the problem and to the tools of genetics, and to the specifics of that problem that started very much right here at the University of Texas. So in the same way that Muller went away but was recognized later, I think you should have pleasure in knowing that you've been recognized twice with the Nobel Prize, because my work started here as well. So keep it up. This is a wonderful institution. I enjoyed not only the science of this institution, but the great breadth of having a true university in which the sciences, the liberal arts, the whole panoply of thinking was on display and available to me, and I relished it, and I know that still exists here. You've got a wonderful institution that I'll forever treasure. Thank you.